Hello everyone. How are you all? I hope you can hear me, see me. No issues with all of that. And we shall start discussing. If you're here, just leave a hi. Let me know where you are joining from. I'm just getting all my notes together because I already had a few things to talk about today. So, yeah, if you're here, just leave a hi. Let me know where you're joining from. How are you doing? How's your Wednesday going? Let me know. I've had a very interesting week in the dog world, I guess. So, we will be discussing all the things that came up for me during this entire week. Um, and let's see where that takes us in the conversation. So last week I had promised that we are going to talk about the study that came out. I think it's a recent study. Let me find that. And if you're here, let me know. Um, to those of you listening for the first time, I think it's important I introduce myself. I'm Saujanya Vijayanagar. I'm from Bangalore. I'm a certified canine behavior consultant from Barks, having done my applied canine biosocial psychology and ethology diploma. Hello, I can see someone here. I'm going to add you to the stage. Wait.
Hello.
Hello. It was a surprise for everybody, including me, whether you're going
Hi.
to join or not. Because
Oh,
yeah, you did mention that you
yeah, yeah,
might like chime in
yeah.
and then discuss because
Yeah.
I shared. So actually, what I have done is my friends from Bags, Surabhi, Anushri, Hana, Eva, Sindur, all of them have the access to come whenever they want to and then join the conversation whenever they'd like. So Surabhi did take up on the offer today. So yeah, let's see. I was just telling them about what the
Mm,
agenda was. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the last week, right? But
mm,
I had wanted to discuss that study I had shared on our group
mm.
about the walk in nature walks versus city walks and the
Mm,
study that
mm.
came out, and we had that conversation on the
Yeah,
group, and I thought that it was a good thing to talk about, and
yeah.
of course the other pointers that I had already put up on the
Mhm.
group that I wanted to discuss about. So how are you, Surbi? It's been a while.
I know. I realized this is the only way now I can get in to properly talk to you. So I was like, might as well just make this opportunity and chat. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
am here as long as Luchi allows me because this is a very tricky time of the evening for me.
I know,
So
I know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So as long as she allows me, I'm here. Yeah.
yeah. To all the people who are watching us, yes, we might just start chatting because we have not seen each other for a while now.
That's true.
But we
That's
have
true.
people joining us from Lithuania and Japan
Oh,
and India.
oh
Like
my God.
that's
Amazing.
that's yeah. Hi Kritika. Hi
Lovely.
Ramon.
Minus
Just let me
20.
know if yeah, -18 is
Seconds.
crazy. Yeah. My sister is in Dallas and I think there's been like -11, -10
Yeah,
the
yeah,
last few days. Um and please let me know how to pronounce your names. I really do not want to get them wrong. I have been on the receiving end of, wrong pronunciation of names. So, yeah, don't want to do that. But hello to all of you who are here. And what do you want to take up should be like one of the topics that I had put up on the group. Do you want to
yeah.
talk about the obesity and overweight issues in dogs? Do you
Yeah,
want
do
to
you want
start
to?
from there?
Yeah, I think you should give context though, no? Start from
Yeah.
like, because I was curious to know like where that's coming from for you as well. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I think the recent post on Instagram that has gone crazy,
Mhm.
obviously. And I'm seeing patchy, internet for Surabhi, but if it's
Oh,
my internet, please let me know. Okay, like
okay.
if it's Yeah, if you're able to hear me, see me,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
I
sure
can hear
it's
you.
mine or yours, right? So I'm just
Yeah.
like letting you know.
Okay.
But if you're not
Sure.
able to hear me, see me, you're always like welcome to let me know
Yeah.
in the comments so that I can figure, if at all I can figure anything. I don't know what can I do about it, right?
Done.
So uh, this is the post I spoke about last week also, and clearly the obsession around the post has not stopped. So that was one thing, but there was a comment, and I didn't want to respond to the person because it was clearly a personal attack, and not
Mm,
definitely on just on me, but it was an attack on Zoe, and that was probably my last straw with that person. But the last comment that they had, and I unfortunately did not take a screenshot before blocking them,
mm,
so I don't know. I'm paraphrasing this for all of you here, but the question was mostly along the lines of, I just had a look at your dog. Do you think that, what does she eat? Do you think that's a healthy weight for her to be?
mm,
And do you think this is the right kind of lifestyle for a beagle? So
mm,
that was the question, right? So, and it was a clear uh, point towards Zoe's weight, right? It was the question on, I just saw your dog and what do they eat is a very clear indicator of where they were coming from. So I really
mm,
did want to have a conversation of um, how we view our
mm,
dog's weight,
mm,
where that comes from. Are we actually looking at our dogs and their relationship with food and their well being? Or are we
mm,
just coming from a space of, and I want to be just out there and then say that, are we coming from a space of fat phobia? Right? Because we
mm,
see a lot of fat phobia in human care world as well, right? So I would not be surprised if that comes and trickles down to dog care world as well.
mm,
And I'm glad you're here for that conversation because, as you all know or don't know, Surabhi is, can a certified canine nutritionist and behavior consultant. So it is great to have her here and have her insights as well when we talk about this conversation. If any of you have any thoughts as we keep discussing this, as we put our thoughts there, um, do leave a comment. Any questions, do leave a comment and we'll take it up. Hope that works, Survi. Both of us are
Yeah.
here quite unprepared for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Why don't you start by sharing your thoughts and then I'll keep like jumping in wherever. Yeah.
Yeah. So, my first and foremost, the first thing that I wanted to address is
Mm,
how obviously we all make mistakes, right? So, there is no point in making us or anyone else feel like we have never made mistakes, right? This is not coming from a higher horse of giving information or advice to dog parents or other people who are watching us. And much like a lot of us, I didn't do the mistake of taking advice on the face value and not researching the advice given to me,
mm,
which was paying Zoe much earlier than required, right? And now we have research. I mean, I was just going through the slides put by Dr. Amber Batson on neutering and spaying and effects of it, long term effects of it. And there is research now that shows about how
yeah.
spaying can lead to weight gain but also hard to manage weight.
Mm,
So obviously, we made that mistake, and what we see right now is a result of that mistake, right? So no point in not acknowledging the fact that we didn't have the right information, we didn't have the right resources, and we ourselves were not in a
mm,
place to research and read up on the advice given to us,
mm,
and critically look at any advice given to us, right? So
mm,
I wanted to acknowledge that, right? There was a mistake made in the past, and yeah, I mean, there's no point in running away from that fact. But coming to the
mm,
point of what she eats, she is on a well balanced diet, she's on a home cooked food, she's, all of
yeah.
that, right? And the reason it's important to mention this also is, if we look at, and Surbi, you can like chime in
Mm,
here, but if we
mm,
look at all the research and information about dog nutrition out there in the world, I'm
mm,
assuming it's a very Eurocentric, white centric
mm,
research, with
mm,
not much information about what people in Asian, countries and
mm,
cultures eat, what they feed
yeah.
their dogs, what do the majority of dogs, which are free roaming dogs, eat, what did they evolve eating. I think that information is not available in the public space for a lot of us. But you can chime in here because you have done this study a lot more
Yeah.
than I have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for sure, right? I think it is very, very, white dominated, like you said. I think a lot of the influence does come from, the US and European cultures. So even this whole piece around raw feeding, I mean, the whole wave of raw feeding, even in India, has come from, those parts of the world, right? And so there is very little space in the narrative on dog nutrition to look at what do Asian cultures, what do Middle Eastern cultures, what do African cultures actually feed their dogs naturally, or what do diets look like there. And in fact, what's really interesting is when you look at the evolution of canine diets, right? And again, a lot of the evolution of these diets, the studies done are actually done on free living dogs, right? And these studies done on free living dogs are done in these parts of the world, are primarily done in African countries, are primarily done in Central Asian countries and Middle Eastern countries. And their diets tell us different things, right? As compared to what the mainstream narrative tells us. So I do think that there are big chunks of representation that are missing in the dog nutrition narrative. And it is what it is, because I feel like the voice is also very small, right? There are very few people advocating for that kind of eat local, feed local, kind of rhetoric, even for dogs here. And again, I think uh, it mirrors human fads on nutrition. So, for example, avocado is a big one, right? Like there was a time where you could get everything with avocado, and avo on toast was like the big thing. But that's also a concept that's popularized by the West, for example, right? It's not something that necessarily is local to where we are or different parts of the country in which people live. And we see that across the board, right? We see that across with like haldi doodh versus Starbucks turmeric latte, for example, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think that those mindsets do sort of seep into even dog nutrition. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that was my first thing, right? Like when you ask what do you feed your dog, you're hoping for an answer that you culturally agree and are accustomed to, and anything else is probably not the right food for your dog, right? In fact, there was one research about what constitutes, free roaming dogs, diet, and as disgusting as it might feel for humans, we there were feces and there was
Yeah.
carcass, and then
Yeah.
you know uh, that shows that our dogs are scavengers. There is a variety of foods that they access just by virtue of the fact that they evolved. And this is spoken even in What is a Dog by Raymond and
Mhm.
Lorna Coppinger, where their food has also evolved by eating human discard, right? Like the leftover foods of humans. So essentially they probably evolved to have a diet similar to the culture of the
Mhm.
humans that they live around. So I'm guessing that representation of course is not there. That
Yeah.
was one. The second thing that came into my mind was fat phobia, and I really did want to talk about that, right? Because I think
Mhm.
that we don't recognize how much it is prevalent in dog care world as much as it is in human care world as well.
Mhm.
So this person, whoever it was, saw my dog, saw that she was slightly overweight, maybe even like quite overweight, and made an
Mhm.
assumption that the life that she's leading is not a good life,
Mhm.
and just by seeing the
That.
weight, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is such a narrow way of looking at
Mm.
an individual's well-being, right? Like if I give my own example, I think for most of my life I've been like at 52 kilos, which is around 100 pounds, I think 100 or
Mhm.
something. And I was just looking at a video a few days back where I was doing my belly dancing, and there was a show, and I was thin as a stick, and that was the leanest I have been. And I was telling my husband that that was the body that I really liked, but that was also the unhealthiest I have been,
Yeah.
right? Like in terms of uh, my mental health was not right, my
Yeah.
physical health was not right, my relationship with food was not right, my just
Mm,
general overall well-being as an individual was not there, right?
mm,
So if I put my picture today and my picture back then, and today I'm a good 10 kilos more, right? That's about 20
mm.
pounds extra for those who are living elsewhere. I'm trying to give another unit of measurement that might be
Yeah.
comfortable as well. But put the two pictures next to each other, and there is going to be a conversation on, oh, you've put on weight, or
Mm,
it's not healthy, or whatever,
mm,
there are comments on either ways, right? Either you're too unhealthy because you're underweight,
mm,
or you're unhealthy because you're overweight. But who is going to look at the overall well-being of the individual, right? Does that rely only on that number on the weighing scale? um,
mm,
is something that I was really thinking about. And I think lots of people, like I think the nutritionists that I was going to prior to you, were also very
mm,
hyper focused on weight and
mm,
weight loss, to a point where I think um, we the only thing we didn't do was keto diet, right? Like that kind of fat diet, right? um, so I want to talk about that. Would you want
mm.
to, like, being from a nutritionist point of view,
Yeah.
and when you have clients come in talking to you about weight loss diet for their dogs, or you see that the
Mm,
dogs have a certain weight, and of course we'll come to that point of how we can consider the well-being of the dog overall,
yeah.
because I'm not denying that Zoe does not have musculoskeletal issues, right? I'm
Yeah.
not denying that fact, and of course we'll
Yeah.
address that in a little bit. But is it fair on an individual where you only uh, evaluate their well-being on the based on the number on their weighing scale?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, it's so like there's so many things right to it, and it's so interlinked to also how human beings respond to each other. So I think first things first, I think in general, a lot of the education and training that most nutritionists receive at the start of their learning journey really is focused on BCS, which is body condition score. Is this whole idea that your dogs have to be lean, you have to be able to sort of make up their shape of the body, etc., etc., right? And I do want to say that I started out like that as well. um, but of course, I have evolved and I have grown from that. And again, I think that one is I think it's just a bad idea to assess a dog's quality of life, quality of health, uh, and even what seems appropriate or inappropriate weight just by virtue of images or videos on social media, because that'll never tell you the full picture, right? And so again, that when people are doing that, it's coming from a very like myopic, very narrow, like you said, mindset. um I think that when we look at, obviously, like even the weight on a weighing scale, even BCS for that matter, the body condition score, and again you have several adaptations of it, right? You have 1 to 5, 1 to 9 kind of situation. um those are not absolute, right? So again, even in the way that I refer to them, is I use them as a starting point to get me a sense of, okay, where does this dog really fall, right? And where does the ideal look like, for me to have some sort of framework to work with. But I think it really does come down to the individual dog. It really does come down to the individual dog's body frame. It comes down to the individual's dog's genetics. It comes out to the individual dog's relationship with their food. It comes down to the individual dog's relationship with stress, with movement, with exercise. There are so many different factors that come together. It comes down to individual health, right? So you talked about early spaying, but dogs also end up putting on a ton of weight because of stress. I have seen that personally with some of the dogs that I work with. Dogs also end up putting on weight when they are struggling with conditions like hypothyroidism as well. And that also happens, and the opposite is also true, right? Where you have weight loss because of a host of other reasons as well. And it's interesting that you talk about like looking at dogs and sort of calling them out on being fat, because Lucci for the longest time struggled to maintain weight but also hold what was normal weight for her. She was always very underweight to the point that we could see her ribs. And she just didn't put on weight for the first 4 years, right? And we've had her like just about 6 years, going to be 6 years this year. So for the first 4 years, she just didn't put on weight. And everybody would sit and comment about, oh, how we're underfeeding her, how we don't feed her enough, we should do this, we should do that, all of that. And it's only in the last 2 years, and I think, I've mentioned this in several different conversations, that she has started putting on weight and she's maintaining weight. And what is so funny is that now when people look at her, people call her a fatty. And I'm like, friends, please make up your mind. Right? Like, do you want to say that she's underweight or do you want to say that she's overweight? Right? And of course, my defense, because it's, again, conversation, is that you're seeing that she's overweight because she's finally put on weight, right? But putting on that weight doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. So again, I think it comes down to like individual dogs and what's going on in their physiological, social, emotional, and environment, because there is a link completely to that in the way that their bodies process and digest and break down food, and what happens there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think both weight gain and weight loss, and I think you put in the point of emotional state, right?
Mm.
And I think we have spoken about Zoe in one of our, previous AMAs with
Yeah.
Sindoor on, after 101, the AMA she has part of her auditorium. And there was a conversation on how she could be munching or
Yeah.
emotional eating, and we have
Yeah.
seen humans do indulge as well in emotional eating,
Yeah.
and there is no point in addressing the behavior of emotional eating if you're
Mm.
not saying what's causing that
Yeah.
emotional eating, right? So I think that is one other thing that I wanted to bring up, which is, if someone is looking at your dog and the only thing they're able to talk about is the dog's weight, then it's worth reflecting whether it's coming from how much fat phobia is
Yeah.
prevalent in, human um, cultures. And of course it's going to trickle down to dog care, and
Yeah.
because it's so conditioned in how we view individuals, be it humans or
Yeah.
non animals, right? So that was the other thing that I wanted to talk about and actually call out fat phobia as
Yeah.
is, right? Because I think
Yeah.
we also fear talking about it for
Yeah.
whatever reason. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that the kind of discriminatory systems we see in human
Mm.
cultures, be it based on race, gender, whatever else, do trickle down to dog
Mm.
care industry as well. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. The other thing is, of course, then comes, how do we know that a dog who is a little overweight or to the point of obese is, how do you take care of their well-being, right? So now
Mm.
coming back to Zoe itself, right? Like when you say well-being, then you have to look at it again holistically, right?
Mm.
um, is she getting enough food? Is she
Mm.
getting too much food? If she's asking for too
Yeah.
much food, then where is it coming from?
Yeah.
uh, and is she not getting the right kind of diet? Is she not getting the right
Mm.
kind of food? Is it health related?
Mm.
But then comes the point of, okay, musculoskeletal issues. So if
Mm.
we have tried weight loss diet for her, and putting all this together, that's not the right thing, and she's not losing weight, but she's on the right kind of diet for her body, then how do we ensure that her joints and muscles don't
Mm.
overload and she's
Mm.
not in discomfort, right? So
Mm.
then comes the point of, okay, the other kind of management that you'll have to
Mm.
do, in terms of, let's say for her, we have rugs around. When she eats, there's a
Yeah.
rug on the floor, there's a carpet on the floor, there's constant massages. In fact, actually, this whole portion I wanted to put up as a Instagram post, and I was like, why? I mean, this is a
Mm.
good thing to have as a
Yeah.
conversation here. And then when I sat down with Zoe, just thinking about it, I was massaging her, and then I realized that
Mm.
the muscle right under her shoulder blades
Mm.
was very tight, if I think about it, maybe a year or two back, and she would
Mm.
just not allow us to massage there. And
Mm.
interesting, and I'm not hyper focused on this in the last year or so, but I think just by the virtue of regularly doing the massages for her,
Mm.
regularly taking care of her environment, that day I just sat and then I was like, okay, fine, can I just check this? Because we're talking
Mm.
about discomfort, and there was no tightness in that part of the body. And I
Mm.
was amazed at that,
Mhm.
because someone here is talking about the well-being of my dog, and here we are making progress in the positive scale of how she has improved,
Mhm.
in her, body, how her muscles are not tight anymore, how her fascia is not tight anymore, right under that point it was very tight, and she would just not let us touch
Mhm.
there, right? So I
Mhm.
think, how would you show this kind of well-being on,
Yeah.
let's say, social media posts, right? So I think it's important to look at it in a more holistic manner of
Mhm.
what well-being means, what this other individual has tried and is trying, for maintaining the dog's well-being, and even the weight and everything, because I understand that she's a small dog, she has very small legs, and too much weight on her body
Yeah.
can obviously affect her limbs. It's something
Yeah.
that I'm aware of it. But how am I helping her otherwise?
Yeah.
How we do functional movement when we do our walks in safaris.
Yeah.
So all of these things do add to her, uh, you know that point of the weight, but
Yeah.
also well-being is not just weight, right? Like,
Yeah.
just looking at the dog's weight is not the only way of measuring their well-being, right? Like, are they get having all their basic survival needs met? Do they have enough uh, choices and agency? Do they have, space to say no? Is there someone to, listen to them when they say no? Are they
Yeah.
having a social life? Are they
Yeah.
having a secure um, base, a secure attachment
Yeah.
figure? I wonder why these are not also considered as
Mhm.
factors for a dog's well-being, right? So I think I wanted to call that out also, that well-being is not just, your dog's weight, or
Mhm.
or training them in a certain manner, and that's not the only way of well-being, and that's
Yeah.
not, you want to look at this in a more holistic manner,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I 100% resonate with that. And I think there is an obsession with, and we see this, right? We see, and it goes back to that point about how, like, so many of the human fads and trends are mirrored with, dogs as well. And so, again, in the human space, we see an obsession with the way that people look. Instagram's dominated with all kinds of fitness coaches and dietitians and nutritionists for human beings, and every other day there is some food that is apparently bad for you, and every other day there is some form of exercise that's going to make you lose weight really quickly. And so I think all of that also is mirrored in the dog space, right? And I think in general we're constantly looking for like a magic bullet to fix everything for us. And I think nutrition, again, in the case of dogs, has been perceived like that, oh, anything and everything, just fix the diet and everything will get resolved. And I think that what I have been saying now for a while is that yes, nutrition is a very important pillar, but it is not the only pillar for health. It is not the only pillar for well-being, right? There is no point of feeding your dog a a great diet if your dog is struggling to cope with difficult situations, or if you're putting your dog into stressful situations repeatedly, right? At some point or the other, this is going to take a toll on your dog's health, and then as wonderful as the diet might be, it's not going to be able to support your dog at all, right? So I think that that's definitely one part of it. Having said that, I think what I also want to, I think caution people too, which, again, in some of these things it get has a tendency to get lost, is that in no way or form are like Saujanya and I saying that obesity is great for your dogs, and like if your dog is overweight, that's perfect. Like, that's not what we're saying at all. We know that obesity, very much like in humans and dogs, can have wider health implications. And I can't speak to the rest of the world, but I know that in India particularly, I think we're used to seeing very obese dogs, right? So a lot of the times, pet parents are in denial of the fact that their dogs are even obese to begin with, right? And we see this specifically with dogs like Labradors and Golden Retrievers and stuff like that. I think the difference, however, is in saying, am I aware of my dog's weight and what's going on there, and how, and the possible implications, and am I proactively addressing that versus being in a state of complete unawareness and ignorance of it, right?
Yeah.
And saying that, oh, my dog's overweight, but that's great, I mean, this is how dogs are supposed to look like, right? Versus saying, okay, I think that's the distinction, and that's a very, very important distinction to make as well. And I think, again, in your case, very much like you said, I think there are experiences and there are things that have happened in Zoe's history, both in terms of health, whether that's spaying, or whether that's just in terms of environmental and relational aspects, um, that you are aware of, and that you are proactively addressing. You're aware of the implications that you are taking into account as well. But I also think we run a very dangerous path when we just start obsessing over the way that our dogs look, and we just keep obsessing over their dog's weight, and like anytime that they go up and anytime that they go down, it becomes like, oh my god, oh my god. So I think at those points in time, it is definitely helpful to look at your dog very holistically and see what are other tenets of that well-being and health that are coming into play. And again, specifically in Zoe's context, because again, Zoe was the example that we were talking about, and I mean, we've done like multiple blood tests over a period of time, multiple blood work that I have been part of in a long distance relationship with y'all. And we know that those parameters are well within normalcy as well, right? And so I feel like that's also such a big indicator of whatever this is working for her. And I think you, in your position of a pet parent, are extending that kind of responsibility and awareness and consciousness to say, okay, I understand implications, and I'm going to proactively try and manage the environment as much as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to like point out a few things that I do when I get a
Mm.
case where the dog is slightly overweight, and when I can see, right, that the dog is having postural or gait changes
Mm.
because of the weight. And I know a few of them I've sent to you as well, in that to help from nutrition point of view. But without gathering the entire case information, it is very hard to give advice, right? So what
Yeah.
if, let's say, for example, when I came to you with Zoe, she was
Mm.
more or less on a fairly good diet. She was not on a bad diet as such. So we knew diet was not the big
Mm.
problem. Then we had to also obviously figure out. I had done few blood works. We were like, we want to test a few other
Yeah.
things. So I normally, with clients, I do talk to them about, if they're not on good diet already, then of course I send them to Surbi and then be like, get on the right kind of diet, but also then figure out health concerns, right? Like what are the
Yeah.
health concerns that the dog might be having. And sometimes that kind of solves the issue for most part, right? And then um, sometimes the dog has a very bad relationship with food because their food is so
Yeah.
restricted that they then tend to scavenge when they are on walks.
Yeah.
So then it's about increasing food security for the dogs, right? So much goes into understanding why the dog's weight is a certain way, why the dog is looking a certain way, what
Yeah.
kind of discomfort the dog might be in. In fact, I obviously, even with all of this, right, like with diet management, health management is a long term process, right, to see
Mm.
how the implications, I mean, what's the impact. But we can immediately start having mats
Yeah.
at home, right?
Yeah.
And that can help your dog's joints so much, right?
Yeah.
And that's the conversation that we tend to have, right? So what is it that you can start doing right away which is
Mm.
not causing the discomfort and worsening it
Yeah.
in the process, right? So
Yeah.
this is how probably I would address when I get a
Mm.
dog. So we don't neglect the fact that there could be concerns where the dog's weight could cause discomfort and
Yeah.
could be an indicator of health concerns or emotional stress or stress in general in the environment. And that's a great very important information for us, right? So there is
Yeah.
no way me or Surbi in our practice ever neglect that fact.
Mm.
But how we address it has to be holistic and not hyper focused on
Yeah.
just the number on the weighing scale, right? And the
Sure.
point is, like in Zoe's case, right, if it was number on the weighing scale that was what we were going for, I think we would be just uh defeated and disappointed
Yeah.
repeatedly, right? It would feel like, that would make us even more obsessed about what we're trying to do, even more obsessed about, how to restrict her food. And plain simple, she's a dog who loves food, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How would that feel when something that you love, something that's part of your joy, and something that's part of your survival, both, right? They're both together, and it's being restricted.
Yeah.
I wonder if that the consequences of that would be much higher,
Mm.
in terms of,
Yeah.
um, what we end up creating for the dog in
Yeah.
question, right? So I think it's important to consider all of these things when we talk about weight gain, obesity in dogs, and stuff like that.
Mm.
In no way, obviously, reiterating that we're saying it's good to have, overweight dogs, and or that it is good for dogs. But it's important to consider the history, the where the dog is at in terms of the health right now, right? Like with Zoe's case, we have seen in the blood reports, everything is normal, right? So if
Mm.
everything is normal health wise, and the only issue is how her musculoskeletal system responds, then I would address that, right?
Yeah.
Without overly obsessing with her
Yeah.
food intake and her weight machine,
Yeah.
numbers. So I think that's how I would address if there was a client who would come in. And I've done that with, I've sent a few people to Surbi as well, for like, and we have spoken about how thyroid can do this. So,
Yeah.
thyroid tests and things like that are very important and crucial in this journey and this process of, figuring out what's happening with the dog, and is the dog healthy, and
Yeah.
is there, welfare compromise. That is more important.
Yeah.
And welfare cannot be equated to weight at all, right? Like just the number, right? Or how your dog is looking. So I think that's an important conversation that I wanted to have, and I think it's a longer conversation. It was no
Mm.
way going to be justified on social media. So that's
Mm.
why I picked up this topic. Anything else you want to add, Surbi, on this?
No, all said. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So I wanted to move on to a few more. Are you here for a little longer?
I think Luchi is giving me the eye now. So I think I'm going to let you take over for the rest of your chat. But thanks so much for letting me be part of this. Yeah, this was so much fun.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for coming in. And as I have told you, otherwise, also, you are welcome at any point.
done. Okay, lots of fun, lots of
Okay.
life. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Okay, people. So if you're here, if you have any questions, then, share the questions. I would, if there are some things that I want Surabhi to take over, I'll obviously let her know, and we can bring her back, uh, as well. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about, let me bring in my, topics to discuss for today. How are you all? If you're here, leave a hi. Let me know you're here, and listening in. Any questions that you might have for me, uh, you can let me know. I can, this is not a, a set agenda for today. So if you have a question, we can talk about that as well. Um, okay. So the other thing that came up, if, if you have questions, just drop in. Uh, Hello, hi from Austria. We're having quite a bit of, um, audience from all over the world, and thank you so much for like tuning in. I don't know what time it is for all of you, so, trying to make some time and then listening into this conversation. Thank you for doing that. So the next topic that I wanted to pick up was, uh, we spoke about this in our last life, so those of you who were here last time will remember this, about how looking up for a longer duration can create discomfort in the neck. Now, I don't think this is news to any of us. We sit in a place where we are looking up for a longer duration, and it is going to hurt our necks. It's known. Now, the situation in question was when the dog is being asked to do that for a very long duration um, with treats in hand, or with whatever in hand, right? So the dog is being asked to do this for long durations in different situations. Versus, there was a situation that someone brought up in the comments, saying that, my dog watches the world around them, looking up for long durations, and Are you trying to say that that's wrong too? So I want to talk about that. Simple answer is the difference between the two situations is consent. One of the two, the dog is doing out of their own choice. They're doing it uh, for what they can see they are getting. I don't know why a dog might be sitting outside and then looking you know outside at the birds. Probably it's enrichment, probably it's information, probably it's just enjoyment, entertainment. It could be anything, and that is um, what the dog wants to engage in, and the dog engages in it for as long as the dog wishes to, uh, and can walk away from it when they are ready for it. But the other situation where there are rewards involved, where there are treats involved, there's probably punishment involved, the dog does not have complete choice in the matter, and so it is not full consent when you're making a dog do something, and not recognizing that it can cause discomfort. So I think the easy answer was that there is a difference in the fact that one involves true consent from the dog and the other does not involve consent, though a dog would might do would do it for the treats, for whatever is at the end of that behavior that they're exhibiting. But the other thing is, it's not that one causes discomfort and the other doesn't cause discomfort. Probably both might cause slight amount of discomfort. I could be looking up at the sky and then admiring the sky and enjoying how the sky looks today and might get discomfort, or I could be sitting in a class listening to a very boring lecture and still might get neck discomfort. The body, the muscles, the strength of the muscles, the flexibility, everything is the same in both situations. So while one point is consent, the other is if I can recognize that a particular activity can involve discomfort for my dog, can cause discomfort for my dog, then I also taken measures to reduce the discomfort. So for example, if Zoe is engaging in, let's say she's sitting outside and she's staring at the, world outside. And remember, Zoe is a very, very small dog. So everything around her is big and huge, and she's looking up for quite a long time. But if I did not recognize that looking up for so long can cause discomfort at the necks, then I'm not going to do anything about it, right? But if I can recognize that um some activities even indulged uh, with full free choice by the dog, having the agency to indulge in that behavior, can cause discomfort, and all we need to do is how to then relieve the discomfort. What do we do when we are in discomfort in the neck? We just relieve the tension there, and that's about it, right? It's important to remember that we cannot turn a blind eye to what can be our dog's experience. And if we want to really help our dogs, we want to support our dogs, take care of our dogs, then we have to first acknowledge that there can be a situation where I can train my dog in a certain way and that can cause discomfort for my dog. Um, Only when we acknowledge and accept that there could be such a impact on my dog can I actually help my dog. Um, so that's one. Second is, if my dog is engaging in this training for such long periods, the amount of discomfort is very different from when they're probably just looking up at the sky. So that was the other thing, because I think we missed the nuance of what consent really means, of putting our dogs in a situation. They may be giving very similar behaviors, but the what caused the behavior, what created that behavior to occur, is very different. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. And as long as you're able to see that certain things can cause discomfort for my dog, it's only then that I can probably also address the discomfort my dog is in. Makes sense? I don't know. I think I wanted to talk about it. I think we forget. about consent, like what really consent means and how important consent can be. I think uh, that's one reason why I wanted to bring that up. The difference between indulging in a behavior on your own versus being forced to exhibit that behavior. I think that's an important distinction between the two. So that was the other thing. Any questions for me? So last time when I was here, I spoke about a study. I'm just bringing up that paper. Um, but I don't want to talk about the study itself. I'll tell you from where this conversation is coming from, and then we will take it from there. Okay. So the name of the study is comparing the differential effects of neighborhood and nature walks on behavior and urinary cortisol levels of dogs. So this study came out, and then there was an article on Psychology Today where there was an opinion piece talking about how, since this study shows that there is no difference between walking your dog in your neighborhood or in the nature, then there shouldn't be so much of obsession about or pushing your dogs to walk in nature alone. Have you heard about the study? Did you come across the conversations around the study? What are your thoughts? So the study concluded. Just talk about what the study concluded, so then we'll take up from there. So basically, what they found was that the urinary cortisol levels were not very different for the dog when walked in both situations. And the dogs were walked by their own, I think their own family members, their own humans, or it was a handler that they got familiar with over a period of time. So the conditions were not very different in terms of who walked the dog. The equipment was different. In 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 uh, in the city walks, I think the equipment was shorter leash, and in the nature walks it's longer leash, I think. And in the neighborhood walks, sorry, I said city walks, I meant neighborhood walks. In the neighborhood walks, I think they were allowed the freedom of choosing collar, harness, head halters and stuff like that. And then on the nature walks, they just did not allow for head halters. So I think that was the only difference in the the two situations. But the dogs were walked otherwise in very similar equipment by similar people in similar conditions, similar timings. I think most of them they had taken into consideration for variations that could have affected the walk in itself. So they found that there was not much of difference between the cortisol levels. So then the conclusion was that not much of a difference whether you walk your dog in the nature or in the neighborhood. Um, now a few things that I want to bring up here, right? While there is this study, there's also study of how the pulse rate drops down when your dog is allowed to sniff a lot more, which is what was done, I think, in the nature walks in this study, right? But the fact that conversations around sniffari have been taken and assumed that sniffari can only happen in nature and cannot happen in neighborhood walks. uh, I think that is where the underlying uh, issue for me is, in terms of the understanding of what we mean when we say walk your dog in a certain way in a certain environment, to allow for more natural behaviors to occur for our dogs. I think a lot of my clients, or a lot of people in general, I have seen that people take away the idea of, oh, I see you walk your dog on long leash, so we do long leash walking, but we still retain the ideas of obedience on walks, not allowing your dog to sniff around, not allowing your dog to engage in natural dog behavior. Uh, but we are walking our dog on long leash, right? Um, Constantly pulling, tugging on the leash. We still continue to retain the techniques, ideologies, philosophies of our older work. All we are doing is change the leash size. And I think In the same manner, what we are doing in this perception that nature walks are better than neighborhood walks, or neighborhood walks are better than nature walks, or there is no difference, is that we are not changing the philosophy of what the walks need to be. We're not changing how we want our dogs, what we don't mind our dogs to do and not do um, on these walks. And I think there lies the problem, not really where you walk your dog or how, things like that. How you walk your dog does matter, because if you're constantly tugging your dog, then you are constantly saying no to your dog, um, and not allowing them to indulge in natural behaviors on walks. So I think where you walk your dog is important, to the extent that you're picking the right kind of environment for your dog. I live in urban metropolitan Indian city, which means that it's constantly crowded. I don't have a nature walk space anywhere, close by. I need to drive another at least half an hour, 45 minutes if I want to go to nature trails as such. Um, and that's impractical. And I don't ask that of my clients either. But what I tend to do with my dogs is we walk at a time. In Ramon, I'll come to your question. Great question, right? I'll come to that as well. um, we work in an environment which is not too distracting. We walk when it's not overstimulating for our dogs. Where I stay, and I wanted to do this video as well, where I wanted to give you a comparison of how it sounds at a peak hour and how it is when it's non-peak hours, when we tend to walk our dogs. And the noise levels can be very high, the distractions, the number of vehicles and pedestrian traffic can be too much. Number of dogs that you might encounter who can themselves be very overstimulated can be too many. We are constantly tugging our dogs. We are walking in a place where we don't want our dogs to do anything other than just walk in straight lines next to us. It's not a great walk to have. I think it's important to consider that aspect of work. So when I talk to my clients also, or when I have to create the working environment for my dog as well, I look at what is going to help my dog to explore this environment. Is it going to be great if we have, like for example, Zoe is, a dog who loves scavenging, loves it, right? Which means that if we are around garbage areas, then she is going to constantly want to go there, while not actually letting off that obsession from there, and then just enjoying the walk and exploring the environment around her. So then we have to figure out, okay, we do not want to go places where there are garbage dumps, so where else can we walk her? uh, so it's important to think about these changes you want to make even in your existing and place where you work. In fact, a client I recently had for my anxious dog program, caring for your anxious dog program, uh, her dog was fearful of people and noises. And she lives in another city like Bangalore, where early morning 4 a.m., 5, actually around 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., people start coming in to deliver milk, deliver newspaper. There are like school kids going around, there are people just walking around, there are dogs being walked. And this client said, I'm okay taking my dog for walk maybe half an hour earlier, when there's not going to be that much of crowd. And I recently received pictures from her showing her dog doing beautifully on walks. So same city spots, same places, same location, but we just change the environment a little bit, because how the environment is does affect your dog's behavior and how their walks go. It's not just about going from neighborhood walk to nature walk. That's not all it is. Of course, walking in nature, whether or not as per the study makes a difference to your dogs, makes a lot of difference to how we feel. So if I am more present in the environment, if I am more calmer, if I am more patient, I'll probably be a better you know uh, handler, leash handler for my dog. I can be better present for my dog during the walk, and I think that would make a lot of difference. I recently saw someone was walking their dog with their phone in their hand, and they were focusing on the phone and not what the dog was doing. And that's such an unfortunate situation we have reached, in terms of dog walking. So it's not so much about you have to find a nature space, otherwise your dog is doomed. uh, that's not what we're saying. We are talking about how we want to change our ideas around walk, what the walk is meant for, what's the goal of the walks that we do with our dogs, what do we want our dogs to achieve with the walks. Is it just elimination? Is it just that someone has told you you have to walk your dog for an hour each time you take your dog out? What are we achieving from this? And that is more important, in my opinion. So I think I wanted to like kind of highlight that. So it's not so much about, if you're not able to find natural spaces, nature environments, where the dogs can engage um, with nature, then find the spaces around you. Like we have an empty plot right next to our uh, house, and there's a video of Zoe doing this walk, not even walk, sniffing around. She's rolling in the dried leaves. She's trying to figure out how to move around. She's getting her functional fitness, functional movement going. She's getting a lot of problem solving going, and those are great skills to develop, and that can be done in even an empty plot like this in a city, in like crowded city environment. I suggest my clients to look for empty plots, open grounds, construction sites, of course, with a lot of safety, vetting for safety, their basements, parking places. Get creative with this and see how you can facilitate similar things by just changing your philosophy and ideas around walks. I hope that makes sense. So there's this question here about how about off-leash walks in safe areas. Um, I have done off leash walks with my dogs when I am very much certain about the environment, about my dog's, you know, emotional state and mental state, and their ability to reconnect with me during the walk. So that's when I have done off leash walks. It's in a very controlled environment where they may not run off. Especially my younger dog, she is a creature of her scent. She loves exploring. She is very curious. So her personality is such that she would uh, you know be carried away by her curiosity. So it's important for me that I take care of safety, and in those places we have done. In fact, the video that you see, that I'm talking about, I'll see if I can link that here. Would you guys want to have a look at that video that I'm talking about? I think it's on my Instagram. I'll link it here. But that was off leash. But the fact that I was at the boundary of that plot, and I was just walking over where she was walking, and we were ready to come back when she was ready. So in that kind of environment, I where I know that it's safe, I have allowed for off leash walking for my dogs. But there's this page that talks about, this is in very human kids context. The page is called the occupational therapist. You find them on Facebook and Instagram also, I think. And they talk about how when you allow for your kids, and I'm talking about kids here because that was a post, but I will obviously modify it to our dogs as well in a minute. But they spoke about how when you have your kids to come in and play and indulge in play activities, the role of a caregiver there is the one of creating safety, and that's about it. The only time you would probably intervene in that situation, in that environment, is when safety becomes an issue. um, I think we as caregivers of dogs as well have a tendency to kind of control everything and then not let our dogs do anything without realizing, okay, fine, if my dog is rolling on leaves or whatever, dried poop, what's the worst that can happen? She has to come back home and we probably have to give her bath. Is that the worst that can happen? Yes. Is that natural behavior to roll on something? Yes. So am I going to allow that to happen? Yes. It's a very natural behavior. It is not causing harm or hazard to my dog. She's not risking her life or the lives of those around her. So there's no need to set strong boundaries, hard boundaries in situations where safety is not a concern. So I think the only time I have intervened, even during when we do our walks now, when we do our snifaris, the only time I would set a boundary is when I feel like she's harming herself, like it could cause harm to Zoe, or it could cause harm to those around her. So if it could be another dog, in another street dog, lying around, or it could be another pet dog who's not comfortable with her, approaching, but Zoe's not able to read the communication. Or it could be kids that, Zoe's great with humans and kids, but we still, if there is another human who is scared, unsure, then those are the points where I would set boundary. Not for every little movement or behavior that my dogs indicate. So I think safe areas, off leash walks, great. I think study that I was mentioning, and I think I'll link that study as well. Just give me a second. Let me find that study. I hope their website. Yeah. So I think this study was a great one in case you haven't already seen it, which is, I think they compare. I have linked it in the comments. You can see it in live chat if you're joining in later. But they compare how the pulse rate of the dogs, with when the dogs are walked on short leash, long leash, and off leash. And obviously, they found that off leash, the pulse was much lower, which meant that, and then there was a lot more sniffing that was happening off leash. But 100% as long as there is safety, and I know that my dog is in the right emotional state, they're not hyper, they're not wired up, they're not stressed, they're not anxious. I know that they are well regulated, emotionally well regulated, and that they are able to respond if I need them to reconnect with me, and you know get me back into their attention, and then not be distracted completely and switched off completely from me. It's only then that I don't mind doing the off leash walks. I hope that answers your question. Thank you for asking. I think that was a great one. We are obviously 1 hour into our conversation, but there was one more thing that I wanted to talk about, and I think that's an easy quick one, I think, that I wanted to address, and then we can switch off if there are no more questions. Okay, so the last question was, the last point that I wanted to make was, how, uh, you know, it's it looks like, if you go through probably my page or Surabhi's page, or even Bark's page, whatever social media accounts that you follow from in the Bark's ecosystem, that it might look like none of us are doing anything. That there are no training tips. There's no practical way of doing things. And when there are, it seems like it's only easy dogs that we are working with. um, and I'm again getting this from the conversation that happened recently, but I think it's important to address it. um, so first and foremost, you would never you will never see me put a dog purposely in a difficult situation, uh, and then kind of force them to exhibit a certain behavior. You will not see that in my page at all. uh, and that's because I don't believe that we need to unnecessarily purposely put our dogs in situations that are difficult for them, that they are finding difficult to cope with, difficult to deal with. And I wouldn't want to put my dog in that situation. So I think you will never see me do that. If you see me get a video of something happen, it would have just happened by luck, stroke of luck, and then we would have got it on camera. For example, Laddu, who is the street dog that keeps coming and going from our house, is very uncomfortable with people coming to our doorstep. It's not even like inside the house. He doesn't like people coming at our gate. And I can see that he struggles. Um, Probably because of being, by virtue of being a street dog, he is obviously in a more restricted space in the house environment. And when people are coming closer to this home, um, he's feeling very uncomfortable. But just to demonstrate that I can get him to stop barking, I wouldn't get someone to come, some stranger to come at our doorstep. What I'd rather do, and when we tend to have, we tend to have people come over, we tend to have, guests come over, or it could be, handyman, whoever it is. If they need to enter the house, then there's a lot of reassurance that happens from my end, from my husband's end. I in fact even tell the people who come in, if they're dog friendly, if they like dogs, that just tell him it's okay, don't he'll figure it out, that he's that you're not a threat. So you'll see a lot of reassurance, because I can recognize that that situation is bothering him a lot. Um, and the other thing that I would do is, there are certain times when either him being in that situation is causing him a lot of distress. This is what happened on Saturday. We were having our Ponder Club event in the evening, and through the day he was quite distressed because we constantly kept having people over. Some of the other work was happening at the house, and he was completely restless. He was dysregulated to a large extent. He was not sleeping the entire day. So I can see how he was irritable. In some situations, in that sense, I would probably take him to the room, be with him, create a lot of distance between him and the stressor. And I think this is why you don't see me or any of us purposely put dogs in stressful situations. And over a period of time, this takes, because we're trying to help the dog understand that at a more cognitive and emotional level, that they don't need to be worried about this. They have the skills, the coping mechanisms, the communication skills to deal with that situation if that ever comes up. And they have a safe, uh, secure person to turn to when things get difficult. And I think those are the skills I want to build for my dogs, not how well they are able to respond to a cue and respond to a behavior. um, and I think we had this conversation extensively during our Ponder Club event, and that is why you will never see me put my dogs in stressful situations purposely. The other thing is that easy dogs and difficult dogs. I hate that label. Is there anyone else who hates these labels as well? I hate them. Uh, it's so unfair to label dogs as easy or difficult. And then it puts the burden on the fact that there's something wrong with the dog. Um, there's something wrong with the dog, not their environment, not their physical or mental state, not the social interactions that they seem to be having, not the approach that their humans probably are taking, but something wrong with the dog. That's what happens when we start labeling our dogs as easy dogs or difficult dogs. So I don't believe that there are any easy or difficult dogs. And I think this is something that people say extensively in gentle parenting of kids. And I try to keep saying about it in the world of dogs, that there are no difficult dogs. There are just dogs dealing with difficult situations, and finding very hard to regulate themselves. They are finding something very difficult. They're finding a situation difficult. They're finding it difficult to deal with things. Um, and to help a dog in that situation needs a lot more empathy, needs a lot more, care and love, because they're struggling. The moment you realize that they are finding a hard time dealing with the situation, uh, I personally would find it very hard to then label them as difficult and put them through more difficulties and keep raising the stakes for that dog, just because I want them to display a certain behavior. So I hate the labels of easy and difficult dogs. I would never respond to those labels, and I'd rather give that perspective that there are dogs who are struggling with difficult situations and they need help, they need support, they need the right kind of environment and tools to cope with that difficulty. We need to help them build the skills to deal with these situations, and that doesn't happen by purposely putting them in stressful situations. So that was the other thing about easy and difficult dogs. And then comes, why do the dogs in the videos that I do seem like very easy dogs? The reason I'm putting it as why, but the question was, the statement made was, you're only working with easy dogs. um so I've addressed the easy difficult part, but why do the dogs around me just seem easy, easier? It's worth thinking about whether I'm working with easy dogs, or I have created relationships with dogs and created spaces for them to be more relaxed and be more regulated and feel more safe. I think it's worth thinking about this perspective as well. I'm not saying that I have not been in situations where the dogs have had difficult reactions. I have been, in fact, the whole point of me starting on this journey was when it got so hard for me to deal with what was going on with Zoe. She was uh, we were finding it so hard to deal with the situations that we were in with her. She was not that easily malleable, and that's what I want to say. Sammy was easily malleable. You could train him to do anything and he would do it, and Zoe was not. And we were constantly told that she's a stubborn dog, she's a bad dog, she's an untrainable dog. You need to up your training and you need to uh, use this and that and whatnot. And we were finding it very hard to deal with the situations we got on with her. And there were situations where Sammy and Zoe were getting into where they were not getting along, and I didn't know how to deal with it. um, and from there we have come to a point where, we're so in tune. Like, one day she could be sleeping little lesser or little extra, and we know that there's something up with her. That takes uh, effort on our end to, one, understand what it means to create safety. How do we create spaces, environments, opportunities for our dogs to be free, be their own selves, be their authentic selves, not constantly having to engage with um, the demands of the humans. um, and that's why you don't probably see the dogs in my videos, or the dogs that I interact with having big emotions. um, and that's worth considering, uh, that if the dogs around me and the my friends, or um, my mentor, and they tend to be a lot more easy. Is it that the dogs are easy, or is it that the way we are approaching makes them feel at ease, and they don't need to use difficult behaviors, or they don't need to use loud behaviors to communicate their mental state? I think that's worth thinking about. I have been in a situation where I have kind of pushed boundary of a street dog, and even in that situation I didn't get bitten, simply because the other dog had the freedom to walk away. And suddenly at one point it dawned on me that, okay, that dog does not want to, and this was back in 2019, I think, when I was doing my practicals and stuff like that. And that kind of learning is humbling, in terms of being able to see you make a mistake, that you put your dog in another dog in a situation where they were not interested and they were communicating but you didn't read it properly, and that could have escalated to any degree, but the dog had the choice to walk away. And that can teach us so much of how important choice and freedom can be in situations. So why would I then put a dog purposely in a situation where they don't have freedom to walk away, and then pride about what behaviors they displayed? So I think it's important to consider these things. uh, Whatever I'm sharing here is another perspective for us to just explore or reflect on or think about, because the dog industry, the dog behavior industry is bombarded with conversations on aversives, punishments, rewards, basically behavior modification. And that's one way to go about. But there are other ways to deal with it. I had to say this, on my Instagram as well, that more than 80% of dog population today are free roaming dogs. Even in that, even in companion dogs, not all of them are in you know Europe and America living and being trained day in and day and night. There are dogs who live in very different parts of the world, who live very safely. I have to add, because the assumption is if you don't train your dog and don't use certain methods and approaches, then you're not creating a safe dog, or you're not taking care of their well-being or their emotions and whatnot. But it's important for us to consider that there's a whole world out there who lives very differently from us. Just like I don't live a certain life, and I don't have a certain lived experience, there are certain people who don't have my lived experience. And my lived experience is that of uh, creating a lifestyle where I have realized that I don't need the kind of training we see in the popular uh, circles, but we still manage to create the life for our dogs that they seem to be comfortable with, they are happy with, they can deal with difficult situations when they encounter it, they are able to maneuver obstacles and problems, uh, and reach out to the humans when they're not able to. And I think we're able to do that without the need for training. And my page here and my conversations here, my discussions here, is to just put out that perspective. And if we can just take in a few things from there and then help our dogs, then that's great. If you think this is not for you, that's great too. There is no hard and fast rule that this is the only way, this is the right way, and this is the way to live with your dogs. This is my way, and this is the way that I live with my dogs. This is the way I advocate for my clients and their dogs. This is also backed by our lived experiences, studies, research, and whatnot. But nobody is compelled to live this way. So I think I wanted to put out there that it's great to open ourselves to other ways of life, other lived experiences, and to explore that there are people living differently. And if that appeals to us, why not? And if that doesn't appeal to us, let's not also. So I wanted to add that bit. And with that, I think that's a good point to end with, I guess. Any thoughts? Any final thoughts before we say bye bye? I was very, very excited about this uh, live because the conversation on fat phobia and obesity and overweight dogs was something that I wanted to have since last Wednesday or Thursday, and I've been like wanting to get on this conversation and chat with you all. So yeah, I was very excited about this one. Do you have any questions, any thoughts, any ideas, anything that you want to talk about in the next live? um, and we can pick that up as well. Anything else for me? Or we could then end the live here. We've gone 1 hour 20 minutes. That's quite a long duration, and a lot of you stayed with me throughout, so thank you for that. Those of you who are watching it later, thank you for watching the entire video. If you can just like the video, share it with your circle of people. Ask those of people whom you think would love or appreciate this kind of information to share it with them. Like the video, share, subscribe, all of that. I hate doing it, but at the end of it, we are in content creation as well, so I have to do it. So if you like this conversation, I will obviously convey my thanks to Surabhi as well. If a lot of you stayed through that conversation too. Um, and thanks to Surabhi for coming in, chiming in the conversation about overweight dogs, and how conversations around that needs to really get a little more sensitive and holistic, I guess. But if you have nothing else for me, then we will end the live now. I will see you all next week. If you have any ideas, if you have any thoughts of what you want to discuss the next time, please feel free to DM me wherever you are on social media with me, Facebook, Instagram, and let me know what you want me to take up, and we can chat about it. I will research if I haven't already researched, if it's a research paper for me to read up on it, and we can discuss that as well. So this is going to be an open conversation space. You can come in with your questions, you can come in with your ideas, um, and maybe at some point I'll start taking people on, and then we can have a chat as well if you have questions. Everything is up in the air right now, and we can do a lot with this. So keep those ideas coming, keep the questions coming, keep discussions coming, and keep participating and then watching me talk about all this. And thank you for encouraging me to do all of this as frequently as I like to do. um, I hope you all have a great day. If you're just starting your day, I hope you have a good evening and great rest of the week. And we shall meet again next Wednesday. If there is a change, like how I thought, probably there would have been a change this week, but there wasn't. Luckily, I could have continued today itself. But if ever there's a change, I will let you know on Facebook or on Instagram and keep you informed of it. So if you're not already following me on either of those places, it's a great idea to follow me there as well. Thank you. Reach out to me with any questions that you might have. There was a question that came up last week on the conversations I had last week. I just completely missed addressing it, so I will take it up next week and we can discuss that. See you. Bye. I will see you next week.